Good day everyone, my dear students. I want to discuss to you why there are so many methods in solving quadratic equations. So let us discuss first what are quadratic equations. When we say quadratic equation, it is an equation in second degree. The general form of the quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, where x is the variable, a, b, and c are constants, and a should not be equal to 0. Why should not a ay dapat hindi maging 0? It is because pag ito ay naging 0, hindi na siya matatawag na quadratic. So, when we solve a particular quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, we are usually looking for what we call the roots. What do we mean by roots? Roots, these are the solutions, values of x, or any variable that would satisfy the given quadratic equation. Okay, ito yung mga values ng x or mga values ng variable to make the equation true. Okay, so in a quadratic equation, there are at most 2 roots. Okay, so when we solve a certain quadratic equation, we expect 2 roots. So we have methods in solving roots of the quadratic equation. Una, yung by square root property. Next, factoring, completing the square, quadratic formula, and another method is through graphing. But why there are so many methods in solving quadratic equations? So we have 3 reasons for that. The first one is not all methods are applicable for all quadratic equations. Ibig sabihin, lahat ng methods natin ay hindi applicable para sa lahat ng quadratic equations. For example, if we have x squared plus 6x minus 16, this equation cannot be solved by square root property. Okay? Example number 2. We have x squared plus 5x minus 16 is equal to 0. This equation cannot be solved by factoring since itong equation na to ay hindi factorable. Reason number 2. Some equations are easier to solve by a particular methods. Ibig sabihin, hindi lahat ng... Hindi, okay na yan. Example number 2. For this reason, we have x squared minus 5x plus 1 is equal to 0. This equation can be solved by completing the square, graphing, and quadratic formula. Hindi pwede ito gamitin ng equation na to yung factoring since itong equation cannot be factored. So, but since the given equation is not factorable, it is easier to solve the roots of it by using quadratic formula or completing the square. So, pwede mo gamitin yung quadratic formula or yung completing the square. Reason number 3. Not all quadratic equations are in the same form. For example, we have x squared minus 5x plus 1 is equal to 0. It's not the same as the form of x squared minus 16 is equal to 0. Hindi ibig sabihin na parehas sila na quadratic ay parehas na rin sila ng method na pwede mo gamitin sa pagsasolve ng roots. Okay? So, hindi lahat ng methods ay pare-parehas ng quadratic equations na i-apply mo doon. So, we always encounter different quadratic equations. Okay? So, that means we will always encounter different quadratic equations. Iba-iba. Hindi siya palagi na kapag ginamit mo yung isang method ay applicable na siya sa lahat ng equations. So, reminder, before we solve a particular quadratic equation, number 1, you must be familiar with the methods of solving roots of quadratic equations. So, one big point as a student in solving roots of a quadratic equations kung alam mo yung method sa pagsosolve ng roots. Okay? Kasi kapag alam mo yung methods, you can choose which is more convenient and appropriate for the given equations. Number 2, you must observe the given quadratic equation in terms of letter A, the number of terms. Titingnan natin kung ilan ang terms sa given quadratic equations. Meron kasing dalawa lang. Kapag dalawa lang, pwede mo siyang isolve ang roots gamit ang factoring. Pwede rin by square root property. Meron ding 4. Letter B, the value of A in the first term. So, kapag ganyan mga given natin na meron values ng A, which is greater than 1, so probably there is an appropriate method that you can use. Pwedeng factoring, pwedeng quadratic formula, and pwede rin ang completing the square. Letter C, being factorable. One of the easiest way if the given quadratic equation is factorable is factoring. And letter D, the form of quadratic equations. So before you get the roots of the quadratic equation, make sure that the equation first should be in general form, wherein yung isang side ng equation ay 0 and then the other side ay nandun nakalagay yung terms. So I do hope that you learned something about why there's so many methods in solving quadratic equations. Thank you and God bless.